She doesn't have permission to plant here.
That's what Vonda Creel, president of the Gardenstone Summit HOA, said as she brought the rusted garden fork down toward my daughter's arm. Not a warning, not a metaphor, a physical strike. The tines caught Morel just above the elbow as she tried to shield her flower bed. She screamed. The watering can hit the concrete. And Vonda? She stepped back like she had been assaulted. "She lunged, Bram!" Vonda snapped. "She swung that can at me." Morel couldn't even lift her left foot without her walker, and Vonda Creel knew that. She also knew I was standing right there on the porch. "She's 13, I said, "and you just hit her with a weapon." Vonda rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. It's a tool. You should be more concerned about the violation notice you're about to receive." I took 2 steps forward and tapped my boot against the curb. "This strip's a municipal easement, county maintained. You're not allowed to enforce HOA standards here." She blinked. "You didn't know?" I smiled without smiling. "I helped write the exemption protocols for ADA-compliant land use. This strip isn't yours, Vonda, and it is my daughter's." She opened her mouth to say something, but I was already kneeling beside Morel, dabbing the blood from her sleeve with my flannel. If you're watching this, and you're a parent, ask yourself something. If someone stabbed your disabled child over a flower bed, would you let that woman keep her title? Subscribe now, because this gets worse before it gets better. And what I'm about to show you, it won't be covered up again. My name is Bram Ellison. I'm a zoning compliance engineer. I've overseen ADA infrastructure plans in 3 states. But here in Gardenstone Summit, I'm just the guy with the non-conforming front yard. That flower bed? We call it the Hope Bed. It was Morel's idea. Every blue lupine she planted marked a new week of progress after spinal surgery. We built it together, over 4 weekends, 15 inches at a time, because her therapist said gardening would help rebuild coordination and range of motion. It's not just a few plants in the dirt. It's recovery. It's hers. We followed every rule. We filed a softscape exemption request. We used native drought-resistant flora. I flagged the project to the HOA 3 weeks in advance. No response, no objection, not a peep, until Vonda drove by and saw Morel on her knees with that watering can. I think it was the sight of her smiling that triggered Vonda. Vonda Creel doesn't like things she can't control. She calls herself a curator of community harmony. But everyone here knows the truth. The woman runs this place like a Cold War dictatorship. You get out of line, you get fined. You paint the door wrong, you get a notice. You park 1 inch over the sidewalk, citation. But this time, she didn't write a warning. She used a fork. And here's what should have happened. A deputy shows up, takes a statement, arrests the woman who assaulted a minor. Open and shut. Instead, we got Deputy Larson, cousin to Vonda's vice president. He knocked once, took photos of the flower bed, and asked if Morel might have startled the neighbor. No handcuffs, no citation, no follow-up. She struck a disabled child and walked away with a smirk. That's when I stopped playing by their rules. Because what Vonda didn't realize is that I know this land better than she ever will. I helped author the state-level guidelines for community ADA landscaping accommodations. I understand municipal boundaries, drainage overlays, and legal setbacks, like most people understand their driveway. That easement she thinks she governs, it's outside her jurisdiction, and the irrigation lines she approved 3 years ago, they violate runoff compliance codes, badly. She drew first blood, but she also drew attention to every corner of her paper kingdom. And what I found next, that's what makes this more than personal. It makes it winnable. By morning, the violation notice was nailed to my door like a scarlet letter. A red triangle marked "Immediate Action Required" sat at the top, in bold, followed by a list of infractions written in clipped, sterile legalese. Unauthorized plantings on restricted frontage. Obstruction of neighborhood aesthetic flow. Failure to remove prior noticeable deviations. None of it had dates, none of it had a cited vote, and none of it mentioned that she hit a child. I stood on the porch with the paper in my hand, watching the same patrol golf cart roll by. Inside sat that same smug enforcer Vonda trained, the one who didn't even look up as she passed our house twice before. They were trying to intimidate me, or maybe provoke me. But the problem with provoking a man who's already decided not to break is that he gets quieter and more methodical. Down the street, 2 houses away, Mrs. Candle was trimming her hedges with little garden scissors. Her grandson had tried to build a koi pond last fall. The board denied it because non-native fauna attracted noise. Then there was the Mignette family at the cul-de-sac. They'd added solar panels 2 years ago. The HOA fined them $300 per month until they had them removed. Pattern. That's what I was seeing now. A deliberate cold system of suppression, backed not by law, but by silence. Every so-called violation Vonda cited fell on families who didn't fall in line. Families with color, families with kids, families who didn't speak HOA. I turned back toward our yard and ran my eyes along the hope bed. Morel hadn't come out that morning. She'd asked me to water for her. Her confidence had cracked overnight. I saw it in the way she held her arms tighter, how she didn't eat breakfast, how her walker stood untouched by the window. That flower bed was supposed to heal her, not humiliate her. I went inside and sat down with my old field tablet, pulled up the local land use overlays. There it was again, as plain as ink. The easement along our sidewalk was county regulated, not HOA, not private, maintained jointly under public works zoning. And yet, every time I clicked into Gardenstone's internal resident portal, I saw Vonda's policies listed as if they extended straight to the curb. False authority masked as protocol. A ping on my phone broke the silence. Neighborhood message board, new post from GS Tone admin. I clicked. It was us. A photo zoomed in on Morel's flower bed. The caption read, "Example of unapproved landscaping currently under board review. Please maintain property appearance in accordance with visual continuity expectations." They didn't even blur her walker out of the frame. I stared at it for a long time. Then I checked the comments. 2 likes. 3 passive-aggressive replies. But buried down in the thread, someone had commented anonymously, "This feels wrong. Thought we supported healing, not harassment." That was all it said. But it was something. A crack in the mirror. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Jareth Moxley stood on my porch, holding a thermos in both hands like it might protect him. His eyes darted over his shoulder, then back to mine. "I just came to say, I saw what happened," he said quietly. "But I wasn't sure what to do." I didn't speak, just opened the door wider. He stepped inside, nervous, walked to the window, looked out at the flower bed, then at the patrol cart making another lazy loop. "I was out front," he said. "Didn't think she said the girl attacked her. That's what's going around now, that Morel swung the can." I finally answered. "She could barely hold it, you know that." "I do," he said, voice cracking. "I know." He turned and opened his wrist, showing me a screen, paused, tapped it. Then I saw it, the fork, the swing, Morel's cry. He'd been wearing a heart monitor that records ambient video. It caught the whole thing. He didn't offer the file, not yet, but he looked like a man who would, eventually. Then he turned to go. "I didn't show you this," he said, "but I might, if things get worse." And things were about to get much worse. I didn't see Jareth for 3 days after that. The patrol cart kept circling, though. Same rotation, morning and evening, slowing just enough in front of our house to let the message settle in. Morel stayed inside. She barely spoke during dinner, only picking at the edges of her plate with one hand. Her other arm, still bandaged, had a ring of faint bruising, yellowing now at the edges. She hadn't touched her walker since the morning after the assault. I didn't press her. I just sat beside her while she watched the rain slide down the window, and I watched the hope bed soak quietly in it. Violation fines began accruing, $50 a day, then $75. Then an administrative escalation surcharge appeared in my HOA account, followed by a final notice to remove non-compliant vegetation by Friday at 5 p.m. or face lien action. It was always dressed up in language, compliance, appearance, harmony, but all I heard was, erase your daughter's joy or lose your home. Friday came. I didn't remove a thing. At 4:37 p.m., I saw Vonda step out of her SUV, clipboard in hand, storming down the street like a lawman with a warrant. Her heels clicked against the pavement like gunshots. She wasn't smiling this time. She was calculating, controlled, dangerous in a way only bureaucrats with unchecked power can be. I opened the door before she could knock. "You've been warned," she said flatly. "This is your final documented refusal. As of now, the board will be initiating lien placement." "And the assault?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. There was no assault. Your daughter created a safety hazard by... I'm going to stop you there, I said. We both know she didn't swing that watering can. Mr. Ellison, I advise you to seek legal... You don't have jurisdiction over that frontage, I interrupted. And you know it, but go ahead. File your lien. I'll be waiting. I shut the door before she could reply. That night, I stayed up late combing through overlay documents again. I wanted to find the crack, the overlooked technicality, the one that would make everything unravel, and sometime past midnight, I found it, not in the plat maps, but in the maintenance records. Gardenstone Summit had quietly shifted irrigation contractors the year prior without holding a public vote, and in the process, they rerouted surface runoff, piping through zones that violated county stormwater codes. It was a minor line item on a subcontract form. Most people would have missed it, but not me. I highlighted it, screenshotted it, and saved it in 3 separate locations. The next morning, I stepped out onto my porch to find a white envelope pinned to the mailbox. It wasn't official. No HOA letterhead, just my name, handwritten. I opened it and found a note written in small, uneven script. She threatened my seat if I spoke, but I have the footage. You're not crazy, she crossed the line. Let me figure it out. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. I had seen it before on HOA budget memos. Jareth was trying. He hadn't turned over the footage yet, but he was moving, shifting, wrestling with something inside himself. He didn't want to be the whistleblower, but he was already halfway down the slope, and he knew there was no coming back up. Later that day, I saw him tending to his front hedge, not trimming, just standing near it, pretending. His eyes met mine for a moment before flicking away like a man carrying contraband. Then he glanced toward the community center. It was subtle, a twitch of the head. But I understood. I drove over later that afternoon, waited until the parking lot was empty, and walked behind the building toward the maintenance alcove. On the ground, tucked behind the gas meter, was a small black USB drive sealed in a bag. I didn't pick it up. Not yet, but I knew exactly what it was, and I knew what it meant. Saturday morning brought silence, but not peace. Morel stayed in bed. The hope bed remained untouched, and I stood in the kitchen staring at the envelope that came with the latest notice. Escalation Phase 3. Pre-line filing notification. They weren't bluffing anymore. Inside was a printout of our HOA violation ledger. Each line read like a warning shot. $75, $150, $275. Administrative penalties stacked with no clear source, just a notation code. VK Dayar, Vonda Creel, direct. That's how brazen she'd become, signing off on punishments like a judge in her own courtroom. But something about the newest notice made my hands still. A line at the bottom in bolder font. Pending property seizure review. HOA resolution, vote scheduled. Seizure. They were talking about stripping the equity from my home over native plants on county easement land. I'd built accessible water channels into that flower bed. I'd filed the ADA exemption form, but Vonda had stopped pretending the rules applied to her. I left the kitchen and opened the door to the garage. Not to retrieve documents or go digging through boxes, but to get the field equipment I used during site inspections. Level stick, slope finder, and soil comp probe. Not for revenge, for proof. The easement needed measurement. If I could prove the land was outside HOA boundary via precise grade slope and distance from lateral curb markers, I'd have what most residents never had. Irrefutable boundary data. I marked the curb line, then followed the standard county protocol, 2 measurements east from the utility access cap, 5 from the light post. My probe stopped short of HOA jurisdiction by exactly 18 inches. That was enough. More than enough. But I didn't stop there. I walked the neighborhood, measured similar zones. 2 houses down, their conforming flower bed crossed deeper into the easement. No violation there, no notices, no fines. Selective enforcement. That's what it was. I cataloged every discrepancy with time-stamped images, uploaded them to a folder, date-stamped, geotagged, labeled. By late afternoon, I was on the county zoning site requesting a public records inspection request. Not of our neighborhood maps, I already had those, but of the contractor change request Vonda had pushed through last year. I suspected she'd modified the common space drainage grid without a vote. The The system gave me a 4-digit confirmation code and a 72-hour fulfillment estimate. As I closed the browser tab, my phone lit up with a group alert from the Gardenstone app. Board resolution meeting, 72 hours. The same. Countdown. She was racing the system, and she wasn't subtle about it. That night, a new banner appeared at the community entrance. Visual uniformity, land property value. Just those 5 words staked into the grass like propaganda. I pulled the car over and stepped out. The sign was bolted deep, but the base plate had a sticker, one of the landscape contractor's newer emblems. The same one I'd traced in the budget amendment. Vonda had installed it without a community vote. Again. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned, expecting nothing. It was Jareth. He stood 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. "You didn't take it," he said. I knew what he meant. "No," I replied, "not yet." He nodded. "I didn't want it to come to this." "It already has." He looked up. "You still think we can stop her?" "I don't need to stop her," I said. "I need to expose her." He exhaled through his nose, like that answer hurt and satisfied him all at once. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. "She made me vote to fine a widow last year. Said the wind chime her husband left was audibly intrusive. That's when I should have left." He turned and walked off without another word. I looked back at the sign. Visual uniformity. It was never about harmony. It was always about control. And now I had enough to start cracking it open. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, something colder. Calculation. The kind of mental clarity that only comes when you've seen exactly how they've built the lie and exactly where to start pulling the threads. By dawn, I had the records request response in my inbox. 3 PDFs, each one an official county-stamped file from last year's contractor transition. The first confirmed what I already suspected. Vonda had bypassed the required community vote to approve the irrigation system upgrade. She'd signed the project under an emergency landscape continuity clause, a clause only valid if storm damage had occurred. But there had been no storm. I double-checked with the county weather logs. That box had been ticked without cause. The second document was worse. It showed the new irrigation lines were rerouted under shared access easements that fell under county protection due to slope runoff concerns. Gardenstone's own design overlays were incompatible with the new pipes, meaning the HOA had created a violation of county code the moment those lines went in. That flower bed of morels? It wasn't a hazard. It was a barrier, keeping those illegal irrigation runoffs from spilling further. She built it out of therapy. Vonda saw it as rebellion. The third PDF was a brief summary of a complaint filed months ago by a resident who noticed sinkage in the southern lots. The file was closed with a note. Referred to internal HOA process. No county follow-up. Vonda buried it. I forwarded the files to a separate offline drive, made copies, and printed hard versions. Then I called in a favor. Not a big one, just a friend from my days consulting with the Department of Infrastructure Enforcement. His name was Holland, and he owed me 2 long lunches and a Christmas favor. I told him what I'd found, told him about the fork, about Morel. He said he'd get someone to quietly take a look, but I wasn't done. I opened the footage folder I'd built of all the landscaping inconsistencies throughout the neighborhood, house by house. I logged where the HOA had ignored clear visual violations. One resident had river stones edging their lawn 5 inches into the easement. Another had vines crawling up a light post. No citations, no fines. I created a comparison chart. Morel's flower bed, with ADA therapeutic design, justification, and 0 encroachment, versus neighbors with aesthetic deviations and no repercussions. And that's when the final piece clicked into place. On the HOA portal, buried under Community Landscaping Exceptions, was a hidden clause, Rule 12B. It read, "Exceptions granted to board-approved designs will be reviewed seasonally. Not voted on, not resident applied, board approved," meaning Vonda had built herself an escape hatch. Every deviation she liked got a pass. Every one she didn't became a fine. And that made everything fall under a single ugly word, discrimination, and I knew exactly what law to use. The Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. It prohibits HOA enforcement that unfairly targets residents with disabilities, including denying modifications necessary for therapeutic or rehabilitative purposes. Morel's therapist had already signed off on the flower bed being part of her recovery plan. I had photos, medical notes, and a full design blueprint filed weeks in advance. It wasn't a garden, it was an accessibility device. Vonda didn't just break HOA rules, she violated federal housing law. At 2:15 p.m., I sat back from my desk and stared out the window at Morel, who was finally outside again. She stood beside the hope bed, not planting, not kneeling, just standing. Her walker balanced beside her, her fingers brushing one of the blue lupines. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't hiding either. That meant I had just enough time. I filled out the FHAA complaint form, attached the zoning documents, included the slope measurements, runoff maps, ADA documentation, therapy letter, and photos. I uploaded the full folder and hit submit. Then I sent a copy to county enforcement. Then one more to a local accessibility rights journalist I knew from a past panel. If Vonda wanted to escalate, so would I. And I would bury her under the very codes she ignored. Monday morning, I was already in the front yard with a fresh tape measure in my hand when the patrol cart rolled past. It slowed more than usual this time. The driver was someone new, one of the landscaping crew Vonda had deputized after the original cart patrol guy resigned. His green vest had no name, tag, just a laminated badge labeled Compliance Observer. He didn't speak, just stared at the yard like he was taking mental notes. I made sure he saw me measuring. I wanted him to. I measured the easement again, this time recording myself with my phone. I narrated the footage like I would during an inspection. Curb line, municipal markers, setback distances. All of it showed the same thing. It wasn't Vonda's to govern. At the 48-second mark, I zoomed in on the county surveyor's stake, still embedded in the ground, 5 feet past the HOA's supposed boundary. No one had noticed it, but I had. And now it was on record. When I turned around, Morel was watching from the porch. She didn't wave, but she nodded. Inside, the air was thick with printed paper and court formatting. I'd stayed up the night before drafting an ADA accessibility justification summary for the Hope Bed. Simple language, precise metrics, signed by her therapist. I had added it as an exhibit in the FHAA complaint. Now I was preparing a duplicate for something else. The HOA board resolution meeting was in 24 hours, and this time I wasn't going as a homeowner. I was going as a licensed accessibility compliance expert. I called in the final favor. A colleague who had worked alongside me during the early revisions of state ADA landscaping overlays. I asked for one thing, a third-party review of Morel's flower bed, conducted under ADA accessibility interpretation guidelines. I didn't need him to side with me, just verify that the structure could reasonably be viewed as a therapeutic device. He agreed. By the afternoon, he sent me back a single-sentence statement, stamped and signed. This therapeutic installation meets the minimum physical and functional criteria of an ADA-compliant accessibility aid when used for rehabilitative gardening. That was all I needed. I printed it on official letterhead, backed it with the therapist's note, and attached it to my resolution statement for the meeting. Then I printed copies for every board member, and one extra for Vonda. At dusk, Morel finally walked into the yard again. She didn't need the walker as much now, but she still kept it nearby. She bent down, slowly, and pulled a few yellowing leaves off one of the lupines. She wasn't crying. Her face was blank, like she was trying to remember what joy had felt like here. I stepped out beside her. "Want to help me paint the marker stones again?" I asked. She looked up. "I thought you said we had to stop." "We did," I said. "But now we're going to win." That night, as the sky turned soft and violet, I sat at the kitchen table organizing every page into clean folders. I laid them out across the wood like evidence in a trial, because that's what this was, the fork, the easement violations, the illegal contractor approval, the footage which I still hadn't retrieved but now had enough leverage to demand. I didn't need to surprise them anymore. I needed to corner them, let them feel safe, let them assume no one was watching. Because when the board sat down tomorrow and tried to push through a lien vote under visual disruption, they'd be doing it against federal housing law, ADA protections, county zoning maps, and therapeutic exemptions. And if they still wanted to vote, good. That would be the last vote they ever took under her name. The community center smelled like laminate and artificial citrus. Rows of cheap plastic chairs lined the room, facing a folding table with the HOA banner sagging behind it. A pitcher of water sat untouched beside a stack of printed agendas. Vonda was already seated when I walked in, flanked by her two usual allies, Carter from Architectural Review and Dana from Records and Minutes. They looked bored, like this was a formality they had already rehearsed the ending to. But Jareth wasn't there yet. That mattered. I signed the resident attendance sheet and took a seat in the third row, center aisle. I wanted a direct line of sight when the resolution came up. I didn't bring a lawyer, just a folder. No threats, just facts. I sat there, silent, while the opening minutes dragged on. Budget approvals, pool resurfacing costs, and one neighbor's minor complaint about exterior paint shades. Then Vonda cleared her throat. "Next on the agenda," she said with that familiar clip tone, "is Resolution 11B, Enforcement Action for Lot 28, Continued Violation of Landscaping Compliance resulting in proposed financial lien per board authority." That was me. I stood before she called my name. "Before this board votes," I said, "I request to submit evidence under the Fair Housing Amendments Act as a protected party under disability accommodation provisions." Vonda frowned. "This is not a legal proceeding, Mr. Ellison." "Correct," I said. "But if you proceed with this vote after being formally notified of your potential violation of federal housing law, you move from ignorance to willful non-compliance." A few heads turned in the crowd. I held up the folder. "This packet includes a zoning overlay, ADA compliance verification, a signed therapeutic statement from my daughter's physical therapist, and a signed interpretation from a certified accessibility consultant." Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Dina reached for a pen. Vonda didn't move. "The land in question," I continued, "is a county easement outside your jurisdiction. The plants in question were part of my daughter's spinal surgery rehabilitation. The design in question meets the state's threshold for accessibility aid landscaping, and the enforcement actions you've taken, fines, threats, public shaming, fall outside your authority and likely violate multiple civil protections." "Are you threatening the board?" Vonda asked coldly. "No," I said. "I'm informing it." The room was dead silent. And then, finally, Jareth walked in. Late. On purpose. He didn't make eye contact as he took his seat at the end of the board table. His tie was crooked. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a small envelope. He passed it down the table without a word. Dana opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. She read it. Then her eyes widened. Vonda leaned over, snatched the paper, read it, froze. She glanced at Jareth. He didn't look up. But I didn't need her to read it aloud. I knew what it was. The video. She could deny the zoning. She could lie about the vote. She could even pretend the easement didn't matter. But she couldn't spin the moment she raised a metal fork and brought it down on a disabled girl's arm. She couldn't rewrite that scream. Not now that it was part of the record. Vonda sat back, lips pressed white, hands folded over the table. "Motion withdrawn," she said. The room murmured. Carter looked stunned. Dina scribbled something in the margins of her minutes, and just like that, the resolution vanished. But it wasn't over, because Jareth finally looked at me, and he nodded. That was all. But that nod broke the spell she'd held over this place for years. And tomorrow, I'd begin to tear down the rest. The next morning, I filed the official motion to audit Gardenstone Summit's landscaping enforcement procedures under ADA conflict review. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. Just a formal step, enough to trigger oversight from the County Housing Authority. Enough to put a government official on Vonda's doorstep with a clipboard and a badge. And I didn't stop there. I submitted a supplemental complaint to the State Accessibility Office. I knew which subsection applied. Outdoor therapeutic installations, non-permanent. I added the third-party verification letter, the footage, the medical note, and a side-by-side image of Morell's flower bed against 3 others in the community that hadn't received citations. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. And now I had the burden of proof off my shoulders and into the hands of someone whose paycheck came from the state, not a homeowner's newsletter. By noon, I'd built the visual timeline. I wanted it clear, simple, chronological. A photo of the flower bed during week 1, with Morell planting the first lupine. a photo of the violation notice tacked to our door, a screenshot of the HOA bulletin board post publicly shaming us, and finally, still frames from the video Jareth had turned over. I labeled them therapy, citation, humiliation, assault. Then I saved the file with a new name, pattern of power. That was the phrase the ADA field reviewer had used in his initial response to my complaint. What you've documented may qualify under a pattern of power clause, especially if the board selectively applied restrictions or penalties. It was the first time someone other than me had said it out loud. I started receiving emails that afternoon, quiet ones. First from Mrs. Candle, who told me her grandson's koi pond project had been rejected without a full board vote. Then from a resident named Raj at the end of the block, who said he was cited for excessive yard ornamentation after placing a single solar light near his porch. No formal inspection, no written rules cited, just a fine. They were small wounds, but together they formed something bigger, a case. I compiled the stories, not as legal evidence, not yet, but as context, pieces of a climate Vonda had spent years curating. Rule by ambiguity, enforcement by intimidation, and above all, plausible deniability. Until now. Because now there was a process she couldn't control. The county housing authority sent confirmation the next day. An inspector would arrive Thursday for an unannounced walkthrough. I wouldn't be told when. That was the point. Transparency only works when no one can prepare for it, and that scared her. I saw it on her face the next time we crossed paths. It was unintentional. We both ended up at the community garden during one of the rare quiet hours. She was checking the irrigation timer. I was walking Morel, helping her stretch. She froze when she saw us. Straightened, her eyes landed on the walker, then on the scar still visible beneath Morel's sleeve. And she looked away. Not out of guilt, out of calculation. Her mind was already searching for the next move. "Mr. Ellison," she said tightly, "I trust the board meeting resolved your concerns." "No," I replied. It confirmed them. Morel looked up at me, confused. But Vonda understood. She held her clipboard a little tighter, then turned and walked out without another word. After she left, Morel stepped into the garden bed. Slowly. No walker. She crouched, carefully, shakily, and pressed a hand to the soil. She stayed there for a long time, eyes closed, breathing in the scent of her flowers. That night, I opened the final file on my desktop. It was labeled Community Petition for Leadership Review. I had kept it there, unfinished, for weeks. Not because I doubted the path, but because I wanted the evidence airtight before I moved. Now I had it. I filled out the header, requested signatures, cited the pattern, linked to my submission folder, set the petition to private circulation, and scheduled it to go live at 8 a.m. Friday, the same day the inspector would arrive, the same day I'd take everything Vonda thought she ruled and pull it out from under her, inch by inch. I woke before sunrise, my alarm buzzing 2 hours earlier than usual. I wanted to see the sun hit the easement line, catch the shadows across the curb, like I had during field inspections years ago. There was something clarifying about early light. It exposed things people thought were hidden. By 7, I was at the printer shop off Route 23 with a USB drive full of documents. I paid extra for color, ink and thick paper stock, nothing glossy, just official enough to feel permanent. Each folder had a cover sheet, HOA enforcement discrepancies and ADA compliance evidence, Gardenstone Summit, prepared by Bram Ellison. 5 copies, 1 for each board member, 1 for the county inspector, 1 for the media, if it came to that. By the time I got home, Morel was outside again, sitting on the garden bench I built during her second week of recovery. She wasn't planting, just sketching. She'd started drawing her own versions of the flowers lately, turning them into surreal creatures with petals like wings and stems that curled into armor. Art therapy, her therapist called it. But to me, it looked like a blueprint for survival. I knelt beside her and set one of the folders down gently. "Is that for them?" she asked. "It's for all of us," I said. The petition had started circulating, quietly at first. I didn't post it to the neighborhood forum, not yet. I'd sent it directly to 20 residents I knew had been quietly watching from behind their blinds. I made it clear, this wasn't about politics. This was about decency, about a child being injured and silenced, about a community run like a private kingdom. By noon, I had 12 signatures. By 2 o'clock, I had 27. At 30, I scheduled the automatic post. Friday morning, right before the inspector arrived, the county played their part exactly as I expected: quiet, professional, and on schedule. A white sedan pulled into the community lot at 10:06 a.m., marked with a single blue emblem for the Office of Housing Oversight. Out stepped a man in his late 50s with a field binder tucked under his arm. I didn't approach him, didn't need to. He started with the common areas, pacing slowly, scribbling notes, checking irrigation access points. When he made his way down our street, I saw Vonda appear on her porch, mouth tight, hair pulled too neatly into a low bun. She offered him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He nodded, said nothing, and moved on. When he reached our house, I saw him pause. He examined the hope bed for nearly 5 minutes, checking the slope, the boundaries, the materials. He jotted something into his binder, then took a step back and stared at the painted stones Morel had placed along the edge. She'd written the names of each flower in chalk: recovery, balance, courage, bloom. He crouched, touched one gently, then stood and walked away. I didn't breathe until his car disappeared around the bend. That evening, the petition hit 62 signatures, more than half the neighborhood. The comments started rolling in underneath. We were always afraid to say something. Thank you. I saw what happened that day. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. It's time for new leadership. I didn't reply to any of them. I let the evidence speak. I let the silence from the board say everything else. That night, I delivered the folders, not by mail, not digitally. I walked each one to the doorstep of the board members and placed them carefully beneath their porch lights. Vonda's house was last. Her driveway was empty. Her blinds were closed. I didn't knock, but I did slide a note inside the folder. I won't let you erase her. That flower bed is staying, and so is the truth. The next morning, I woke to find a single word added to the top of our HOA portal: pending. No fines, no votes. Just a system, freezing under the weight of exposure, and the feeling that the wall she built around this neighborhood had just begun to crack. The word pending sat at the top of the HOA portal like a thin layer of ice. It didn't melt, didn't shift, just hovered there, vague and sterile, replacing the flood of red notices that had haunted my dashboard for weeks. But it wasn't just a change in language. It was a signal. Something behind the curtain had stalled. By noon, the county inspector's preliminary findings were released. Just one page marked draft, subject to final review. But it was enough. It confirmed that Gardenstone Summit's irrigation modifications had been made without the required municipal notification and had disrupted approved stormwater flow. It also verified that landscaping on county-maintained easements fell outside HOA enforcement authority. The final paragraph included a quiet dagger. Evidence suggests selective enforcement inconsistent with community governance standards. I printed it, read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it beside Morel's sketchbook. That same day, Vonda sent her first blast email since the meeting. No apology, no acknowledgement of the inspector's visit. Just a cold note reminding residents that maintaining harmony requires compliance and that the board would be considering new clarification protocols for landscape design. It was bureaucratic theater, bland enough to look innocent, sharp enough to be a warning, but no one was buying it anymore. The petition had reached 84 signatures. At 90, we could formally demand a vote of no confidence under Gardenstone bylaws. Residents I'd never met were reaching out, asking where to sign, asking what else had been hidden, asking how it had gone this far. One message simply read, "I always thought it was just us." That night, I walked the neighborhood again. I wasn't collecting evidence this time. I was watching. There was something subtle happening. More flags in windows, more people outside tending their yards like they'd been waiting for permission. A teenager chalked smiley faces on the curb in front of his house. An older couple added wind chimes to their porch. They weren't afraid anymore. Morel joined me for the last block. No walker this time, just slow steps, careful and grounded. She held my arm when she needed to, but she never asked to stop. We paused near the community center, where someone had placed a small blue ribbon on the signpost. "It's spreading," she said. "It is," I replied. On the way back, I saw Carter, the board member who always voted with Vonda, standing on his porch, smoking a cigarette he thought no one would see. His shirt was untucked. His eyes met mine across the street. He didn't speak. But he didn't look away either. I nodded. He didn't nod back. But he didn't look smug anymore. At home, Morel went straight to the hope bed. She knelt, slowly, deliberately, and planted 2 new lupines. Then she sat back and traced her fingers through the soil like she was smoothing it into place. "Can I paint more rocks?" she asked. "Any color you want." She grinned. Inside, I opened the HOA portal one more time. A new message had appeared. Special meeting called, Friday. Topic: Board structure and member tenure review. That wasn't just a meeting. That was a survival scramble. They could feel it. And right below the announcement, a quiet line had been added to the violation section of my account. Status: cleared, no explanation, no credit, no reversal message, just gone. The same way they'd built it, without transparency, without accountability, without truth. But now, we weren't playing their game. We were watching, we were documenting, and we were done waiting for their permission. Because the real vote wasn't on their calendar. It was already in motion. And come Friday, they'd realize how quickly a neighborhood can turn when the people finally see the levers behind the curtain. Friday came with overcast skies and a nervous stillness in the air, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. The special meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock at the community center, but by 5:30, the parking lot was already full. Residents stood outside in small knots, murmuring, watching. No one laughed, no one smiled. The tension was quiet and tight, coiled like a spring. I arrived with Morel. She wore a long-sleeved shirt to cover the faint scar, but she walked without help. When we entered the building, I noticed how many chairs had been added, extra rows that stretched to the back wall, where people now stood, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Vonda sat at the head of the folding table again, this time without her usual command. No clipboard, no dramatic shuffle of papers. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her own policies had finally settled on her shoulders. Carter and Dina sat beside her, both unusually stiff, and Jareth, still quiet, still unreadable, looked as if he'd aged 10 years in a week. The microphone crackled once, then steadied. Vonda stood. "This meeting has been called to address growing concerns over board authority, member tenure, and neighborhood governance," she began, her voice sharp but thinner than usual. "Per Gardenstone bylaws, resident petitions exceeding 60 signatures may trigger a special hearing. This petition has exceeded that. Number: We will now allow brief public statements before internal review begins." She didn't call for questions. She didn't smile. She didn't make eye contact with me. But I stood anyway. No one stopped me. "I'm Bram Ellison," I said. "Lot 28. No one needed reminding. My daughter was assaulted 6 weeks ago, struck with a gardening tool by someone who sits on this board. The reason? She was planting flowers, approved by her therapist, inside a county-managed easement. The board not only ignored this, but escalated fines, issued false citations, and publicly humiliated my family." Silence. I continued. "I filed a formal ADA complaint. I filed an FHAA complaint. I submitted evidence of jurisdiction overreach, unauthorized irrigation projects, and selective enforcement. The county investigator confirmed code violations. The fines were quietly cleared. But we haven't forgotten what was done." A murmur moved through the room, soft, growing. I turned to the crowd. "I'm not the only one. I have emails, statements, and testimonies from 32 other residents, each targeted, isolated, fined, or threatened under rules selectively enforced or inconsistently applied." I raised a folder. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a culture of suppression dressed up as governance." Then I looked at Jareth. He didn't look away. "I don't want power," I said, "but I do want accountability. This board needs to change, not because of a single flower bed, but because we've all been planting in fear." Someone clapped, just one, then 2 more joined. Then the room erupted, not wild, not unhinged, just loud, long, and relentless. Vonda didn't stand again. She stayed seated, hands locked, mouth tight. Dina leaned into the mic. "As treasurer," she said slowly, "I propose a motion to suspend enforcement authority until an independent audit is complete." Carter looked surprised but nodded. I second it, he said. Then Jareth leaned forward, cleared his throat. I move, we vote to restructure the board, per Section 4C, pending resident confirmation. It was done. No speeches, no denials, no final grasp for control. Vonda's face didn't change, but her knuckles went white. The vote passed. Unanimous. 3 hands raised, no one abstained. The meeting adjourned without ceremony, no gavel, no closing remarks. People lingered outside for a long time, talking in low voices, hugging, shaking hands. A few neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years came up to me, thanked me, asked how Morel was doing. She just smiled. That small, quiet kind of smile that says, I'm not afraid anymore. We walked home as the sun finally broke through the clouds, light catching the petals in the hope bed, like they'd been waiting all week to bloom for this moment. The following morning felt different. The patrol cart didn't come by. The email alerts from the HOA portal had stopped. The air itself felt lighter, less watched. I walked out barefoot, the grass still wet from the night's rain, and stood by the hope bed. The soil was dark and rich, the blue lupines glistening like they had been waiting for the storm to end. Morel was already there. She had her sketchbook open on her lap, legs folded under her, a streak of sunlight touching the side of her face. She didn't notice me right away. She was focused on drawing the flowers, only this time, she wasn't sketching them as creatures or armor. They looked exactly as they were, unbroken, alive. When she looked up, she said, They said the board's gone. Mr. Moxley told me. Not gone, I said, crouching beside her. Just replaced by people who remember what decency looks like. She smiled. Does that mean we can keep it? I nodded. It means they're naming it. Her eyes widened. Naming it? They're putting it on record as a permanent ADA landmark, county approved. The Hope Bed. They said it'll be protected for future residents who want to build therapy gardens of their own. For a second, she didn't speak. Then she whispered, I thought she'd take everything. She tried, I said softly. But she forgot who she was up against. A car slowed in front of the house. It wasn't the patrol cart this time. It was a silver sedan with the county seal on the door. Inspector Holland stepped out, clipboard in hand, but this time he didn't look like an investigator. He looked like someone delivering closure. Mr. Ellison, he said, shaking my hand. Thought you should know the official report is finalized. HOA authority has been formally restricted to residential lots only. No jurisdiction on easements, no discretionary fines without county verification. And, he turned toward the flower bed, your daughter's design inspired a new state-level review guideline. We're calling it an Accessibility Inclusion Amendment. You'd be surprised how many cases like this we've missed. Morel blinked, unsure how to respond. So, I said it for both of us. Thank you. He nodded once and left as quietly as he came. When he drove away, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. Later that afternoon, neighbors began to visit. One by one, they drifted toward our yard, some with coffee cups, others with quiet smiles. No formal gathering, no speeches, just presence. The kind that says, we saw, we believed, we're still here. Even Jareth came, carrying a small wooden plaque. He looked healthier, lighter. He handed it to Morel. The engraving read, The Hope Bed, planted for healing, preserved by courage. She ran her fingers over the letters like she couldn't believe they were real. You did this, she told him. He shook his head. Your dad did. I corrected them both. No, I said. She did. We all just followed her lead. That night, the neighborhood lights came on early, for the first time. In years, no one dimmed theirs out of fear of being cited for brightness violations. The air was filled with the sound of small things returning. Wind chimes, laughter, a dog barking without someone filing a noise complaint. I stood on the porch with Morel beside me. The hope bed glowed faintly in the amber light. Every stone she'd painted seemed to tell the same story. A battle fought not with fists, but with patience, law, and the unshakable need to defend something innocent. She leaned her head against my arm and said, Do you think she hates us? She'll hate the mirror, I said, not us. Because Vonda's reflection would be waiting in every meeting, every audit, every whisper of reform she'd accidentally created. That was her punishment, the legacy of being remembered for what she tried to destroy. And ours was peace, hard-won, deserved, and visible. If you're watching this, remember something. People like Vonda count on silence. They thrive on neighbors who look away. But the second one person stands, one voice pushes back, the whole machine starts to crack. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?